How's Jay?
I'm good, how are you?
Good.
I don't need this, I realize I lost my pointer. I can't get mine to stay on long enough to do yet.
You can change that setting when you get a chance.
Yeah, well. I can just read my name though anytime I want to. I come to Nancy.
It's in there. Hit your button again. There you go. And the last one. There you go. Get your passcode. And you can change it to do it if you want. And then I emailed you. I'd like to call tonight's meeting to order and ask you to stand, and I'm going to ask Mr. Calabretta if he'll offer our invocation tonight. Please silence your phones.
Father, as we come together tonight, we thank you that you can help us and that you can guide in the deliberations of this city council. Bless and help our city. We thank you for Bowie, Texas. And may it always be a shining light of great people, great government. We'll thank you for that. We ask that you bless in the proceedings. We ask it all in Jesus' name and for his glory. Amen.
Amen. Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I can too. I can if I can find my agenda.
On the computer. It was on our computer.
Okay, the first thing on our agenda today will be a public hearing, and I will call the public hearing for 6:02. I am going to read something to you. The public hearing is a request from Eddie Biles to rezone approximately 1.5 acres, being a part of Lot 3 and all of Lots 4, 5, 6, and Block 1, Baker Addition, from single-family with manufactured housing district to light industrial district for construction of multiple rental storage buildings. At this time, if you have anything to say, I would welcome you to the podium.
I'll oppose it.
Would you come to the podium, please, and announce your name?
I'm Donna Kaufman, and I have come to oppose this request from Mr. Biles wanting to have part of his business in a residential area. And I pray that y'all will go along with what the zoning committee has already requested in my favor, that y'all will go along with that, because I've lived over there for over 50 years, and I feel like that with having that buildings right across my house is a not something that needs to be done in my area because it's a public school, kids up and down the road. And I think that y'all should vote to not make it and keep it a residential area. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? Yes, sir. Please come to the podium and state your name.
My name's Jack McDonald. I'm a longtime best friend of Donna Kaufman. I'm very familiar with the neighborhood over there they're talking about. Her house is the only house that's be directly across from these units, and it's already lit up pretty good from the ones that are on the hill. These will be right across the street from her house. She's been there like over 50 years, and I don't think she deserves that. It'll increase traffic on that already busy street. Wilburg is a cut-through street from 59 to 101. After the tornado, there was a constant stream of trucks, trailers, whatever you call it, by her house all day long into the night. So it's a very busy street. And like she said, there's a school bus, several school bus stops on that street. And if this passes, it will decrease the property values and increase the traffic. And I think you should oppose it. It also could set a bad precedent for future requests. They could request business in your area. And if this one passes, the next one might pass. So think about it. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Are there any other public comments? Well, if not, yes, sir, you sure can. Please come to the podium. State your name for those that don't know you.
I'm Eddie Biles, and I own the storage buildings on Decatur Street. And this property we're talking about is directly behind it, connecting to it. And if I can do this, I'm gonna put a solid fence up all the way up and down Wilbarger Street. There won't be any access to it from Wilbarger Street. It'll all have to come in from the front gate where it comes in now, from Decatur Street. There'll be no access to it back there. It won't affect traffic back there. And I'll put as tall a fence as the city will let me put it, solid metal fence where you can't see through it other than over the fence. And so it's not gonna affect the traffic or nothing on Wilbarger Street. It won't do anything other than, it'll look better than what it does now as far as just an empty lot with weeds and trees over there. There's nothing there. It'll be okay. I mean, right now it's okay to put trailer houses over. I could put trailer houses all up and down there and have a bunch of drug heads renting them and stuff over there. And that would be a whole lot worse. I mean, it's okay to do that, but that'd be a whole lot worse than them storage buildings would be with a solid fence up and down through there with no access from that street. So I don't think it would be a bit of problem as far as bothering anybody on that street. That's the only thing I know of as far as that there should be any problem with it, and I don't see a problem with any of that as far as it's not gonna be, I mean, it may be a little more lit up over there, but
Yeah.
that would, I mean, lighting the place up is the only way I know of keeping people where you leave everything dark and you're just inviting thieves to come in. So, you can't do it without having lights around the place, but if I put buildings down that front, the lights would be on the opposite side of it, and the buildings would be blocking the light to where them buildings are tall enough that it would block the whole view of the whole place if you started out with buildings all the way up and down that street. So there's ways to do it to where it's not gonna bother anybody on that street.
Thank you, Mr. Biles.
Thank you.
Okay, so this is, does the council want to discuss this?
just public comment part, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
it's coming up in the agenda. We can-
I just checked with the attorney.
Okay,
close it.
It's okay for us to do this.
okay.
So do you guys need to discuss anything? Do we need to ask any more questions?
Well, what, I mean, as far as the property over there, as far as, it doesn't have to be just manufactured housing, it can be residential housing, correct, of any kind.
Yes.
And is there anybody here from planning and zoning that, their thoughts on that?
Yes, but I actually think they come in under the agenda.
Okay.
So they'll be available to you under the agenda item. Any other questions for the public comments area? Okay, so if not, then we'll close the public hearing at 6:09. Next item on the agenda is items of interest. The first thing I'm going to tell you is, I think each one of you have seen the boxes laid in front of you. That's your iPads that Sandy has put together. Each one of you have your own new email address. That's where Sandy will be communicating with you in any way, is to that new email. And after the meeting, you're all encouraged to come see her, so she can give you all your logins and your passcodes and everything that you need to get into. From now on, all your packet information will be coming to the email on this iPad. Another thing I would like to say during this time is, and I know Bert's going to talk about the COVID shock clinic, all I really want to do is to make sure that all the volunteers that worked with us are aware of how grateful we are for the manning the telephones for 5 days, taking phone calls for appointments, because Christy, I think, will attest to the fact that was chaos. I think I worked all but one day on the phone for at least a couple of hours. So I'm grateful for the community, but man, if we have to take appointments like that again, I'm going on vacation. I'm going to move public comments to the end of the meeting. So right now, we're going to go into, let's do the city manager report first.
As most of you know about it, we had a coronavirus shot clinic put on by the city and the Texas National Guard. The National Guard was a combination of an infantry unit and a medical unit. Overall, we had about 20 guardsmen processing patients and giving shots. Our only cost in the operation was lunch for 2 days for the guardsmen and a few people to help keep everything organized. Now, Galen mentioned the phone operations. I did not think about putting that in, but every time I went back in the EOC, they were back there, both phones were ringing, and they were going nuts, so a lot of things went on there. The Parks Department contributed personnel, which included Bobby Bazzano, Victor Segura, and Bunny Kinder, and Paige Ward, and they we learned as we went as far as how we should funnel people through there, 70 at a time, which is what we did. Tuesday was a little confusing, but Wednesday everything ran smoothly because we learned as we went. Around 450 shots were given on Tuesday, and Wednesday over 600 shots were given, which totals more than 1,000 vaccines. Kurt Higgins, our EMC director, along with Lance Liggett of the Texas Department of Emergency Management, should be credited with putting this whole operation together. It was a job well done. We did good. And we had people from all over North Texas there, so the mayor and I fended a call today from a complaint out of Wichita Falls, and so I mean it was just widespread where everybody came from for it. Remnants of the February freeze continue to plague our city personnel with problems directly related to the weather, but things are winding down. As you probably know, we were declared a federal and state disaster area by FEMA. I'm in the process of making application to FEMA to cover our costs during the freeze, which includes fixing water leaks, fixing the problems at the water plant, the cost of a warming center for the week, and other costs related directly to the freezing weather. In the agenda, you will see a resolution for us to borrow money for our fuel costs for the freezing weather. Actually, we got notice late this afternoon that we don't have to pass that resolution because of, we were doing the tax resolution because of tax ramifications, but if we do borrow this money, it will be, every who borrows it will have to pay tax on it. This is just in case resolution, which allows us to borrow money if we choose to go that route. The state of Texas is an infringing state trying to come up with a solution to the overbilling by ERCOT, in which most people think that they overbill for 32 hours of maximum fuel charges. The governor does not think he has the authority to lower the charges, but the attorney general thinks he does. The governor and lieutenant governor are at odds over how we can get the charges lowered. The Senate has already passed a bill to lower the charges, but the new Speaker of the House initially would not let the House vote on the issue, but finally referred it to a committee for a possible hearing. All of this to say that we still don't know what our fuel charges will be on our next bill from BTU. They are as confused as we are about what direction it's going to go. So it's all kind of up in the air. Because of the freeze, there have been over 350 bills that the Texas Public Power Association is tracking and keeping us informed on. Everything from power plant weatherization to rules on rolling back out to gas supply bills are included in this possible legislation. We've even received several notices from law firms in Austin whose clients are insurance companies that are suing the electric systems that lost power. Luckily, we won't be liable in those suits because we never lost power. So that's one good thing about it. Anybody have any questions?
No questions for the city manager? So we're going to rearrange the agenda, and we're going to ask Valerie Alverson, Mathis Weston Hobine. She's going to come present our audit. She's going to present you with a bound copy.
Thank you.
Sure, I have one printed out. Thank you.
Okay.
Got the floor is yours.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. I'm Valerie Halverson. I'm a shareholder at MWH Group, and we just completed the city audit for the year ended September 30, 2020. And hopefully y'all have had a little bit of a chance to review it. I think maybe you've had it for a couple of days. I'm going to go through what I like to do is hit the highlights for you and kind of point out the things that I would be looking for if I were in your shoes. But please feel free to stop and ask me questions as I go. I kind of, like I said, hit the highlights and do it fairly quickly, but I'm happy to go into anything in more detail if you would like to hear it. So I'm going to start first. This is the bound copy of the actual audit report, and I'm just going to go through and point out some things to you. So I'll start first on numbered page 1. And this is our independent auditor's report. It looks like this. It's on our letterhead. And it says, this is where we provide an opinion on the financial statements, and this letter says that we believe that the financial statements are fairly presented in all material respects. That's what we call an unmodified opinion, and it's as nice as we get as auditors, the opinion you want and what you would expect. So then moving on to page 3 starts our management's discussion and analysis. And this is intended for people who are not used to reading financial statements very frequently, and so it provides a little bit more of a discussion on what happened during the year and a little bit of a discussion on how the financial statements work. If you have not spent a lot of time looking at governmental financials, they're a lot different than nonprofit or for-profit financials, so there's a little bit of explanation in here on how they work together. I like to focus on MD&A for these conversations because it's the only place where there's comparative information, so you can see current and prior year. So if you want to go to page 5, that second section, that table down there is the city's net position. So this provides our assets, liabilities, and net position and it has 2020 information and 2019. The first two columns are your governmental activities, so that's basically your general fund. The next two columns are your business type activities, so that's going to be your electric, water, sewer, all combined into that column. And then the third, the fifth and sixth columns, if you will, the third section is the totals. So the city's total assets are that third line down, about 38.8 million at the end of the year versus 38.4 million at the end of last year. So up a little bit. Going down a couple rows, the total liabilities are just about 8 million, down from about 9.4 million at this time last year. That decrease is a combination of paying down some long-term debt and your net pension liability, which is the pension is through TMRS, and they calculate a pension liability, and that liability decreased because your investments for your pension went up quite a bit. So that was a big change. And then the very bottom line is your total net position. So that's basically the difference between your assets and liabilities. And your total net position is just over 30,225,000 at the end of September 30, versus 29.6 at this time last year. So a pretty good increase from 2019. Moving on to page 7. This is our changes in net position, and again, this is comparative, and the columns kind of work the same. So this is the revenues, expenses, transfers, and then your change in net position. That first column there is your governmental activities for 2020. And if you go all the way down to the bottom, you'll see your change in net position as the third line from the bottom. We had an increase of about 510,000 as a result of operations in 2020. A lot of that is the city received, or a big piece of it is that the city received some CARES Act funding, which helped cover some additional fire and ambulance costs during the year. And then there was also some insurance proceeds as a result of the tornado. The next two lines then are your business type activities, your increase in net position and your business type, again, which is your electric, water, sewer, an increase of about 114,000. Last year is about 1.4 million. And as I'm sure you remember, y'all had a pretty big decrease in your electric rates from 2019 to 2020. And so your charges for services went down quite a bit. Also, y'all had some big repairs and maintenance costs required as a result of the tornado in your electric grid. So that caused some of your expenses to increase. So for the city overall, you had an increase in net position of about 623,000 versus 1.4 million in 2019. But again, a lot of that was the change in your electric rates. So past that is just some additional information on your capital assets and your long-term debt. I'm going to go just straight to the basic financial statements. Again, if y'all have any questions, please feel free to stop me. I always toe the line between boring you to death and providing you the information you need. So starting on page 11 is your basic financial statements. And this first statement here is your statement of net position. So the governmental, business type, and total columns, those first three columns are the numbers that we just went over. The next two columns are your component units. So this is the Bowie Economic Development Corporation and the 4B Sales Tax Corporation. And this statement and the following statement are the only place where those two are presented on a statement themselves. The net position for the BEDC was about 5.79 million last year, or at 2020, 9/30/2020. And the 4B had about just under 6 million at the end of September 30. Moving on to the next two pages is your statement of activities. So this is, again, the same basic numbers that we went over before, and also include your component units. This statement is a little bit goofy. It starts with expenses and then provides direct revenues for those expenses by department. And then it comes over and totals down. So on page 13, the bottom numbers, you'll see the change in net position, that 510,000 just about that we mentioned earlier. So you'll see the totals. So governmental increased by 508,000, business type 114,000, the city as a whole 622, and then the next two numbers are your BEDC and 4B. So BEDC had an increase of about 321,000, and 4B had an increase of about 160,000. The next two pages start your governmental funds, the fund balance, the fund statements. So in a governmental entity, the government-wide statements that we went over first are full accrual. That means they have your fixed assets and your long-term debt included. But the governmental funds do not. They're on a modified accrual basis of accounting. It's intended to be more in line with your budget, more like a cash basis. And so your long-term debt and long-term assets are not on here. Those are really run through the income statement. So for the general fund, you had about $3 million in assets. So that's going to be your assets, your cash, receivables, things that are a little more current. Liabilities are about $237,000. Your unavailable revenue is generally revenue that is not expected to be collected within the 60 days following year end, and that's a higher number this year because you got a grant receivable in there. You received 20% of the CARES Act funding within this fiscal year and the other 80% later. So that's unavailable technically in the general fund, but is recognized as revenue in the government-wide statements. So overall, your total fund balance is about $2.3 million for the general fund. Page 15 is your reconciliation that just kind of walks you through how we get to our fund balance on page 14 to our net position on page 11. And then moving on to the next statement is your statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance, again for your governmental fund. Total revenues for the general fund are about $6 million. Total expenditures are about $7.9 million. And then there were transfers of about $1.8 million to get you back, plus proceeds from debt to get you back to your increase of $327,000 in your general fund balance. The next page is another reconciliation that walks you through how to get from our change in fund balance to the change in net position. And then following that, we get to our fund statements for the utility fund. And so these numbers are on the same basis of accounting. They're the same numbers that we went over at the beginning. They're just in a little different format. They provide a little more detail if you want to see a more detailed breakout of revenues and expenses. So that statement. And then on page 20 is your statement of cash flows, which is provided only for the utility fund. Those statements are intended to be more like a business statement, so the cash flow is included. But overall, your cash increased in the utility fund by about $359,000. Moving on to page 21 starts our notes to the financial statements. So this provides some additional information on your summary, your significant accounting policies. There were no new accounting policies adopted during this year, and the existing accounting policies were not changed during the year, which I'm required to tell you. Page 27 shows your investments. You had total investments for the city, about $5.3 million, and there were some new investments for EDC and 4B, and those weighted average maturities. Page 29 shows a breakout of the funds that are restricted, your assets that are restricted. And there was a little bit of a jump in here as there was some pandemic response money that was restricted and unused at year end. But the bulk of it has always been and continues to be capital projects related. Page 30 and 31 provide some detail on your capital assets and your activity for the year, with the top being governmental and the second being business type. And again, obviously, there's a lot of information in here, so I'm trying to run through it quickly. Page 33 shows your long-term debt activity. Y'all had a refunding on a bond this year, so you paid off one bond obligation with another one for a lower rate for some present value savings. And then I'll just kind of point out, because I pointed this out briefly, on page 39, we get into our pension footnote. Page 39, that bottom part kind of explains how the pension liability works. So the city pays into TMRS every month, and the set percent that TMRS requires. And so there is a liability related to the current and former employees' pension, and then TMRS accumulates assets for it, and it comes up with a net pension liability, which is what we book on your balance sheet. At the end of the year last year, that top number on the third column, it was about $2.2 million, a little over $2 million. And there was a pretty big decrease. So this year is about $685,000. So that was a really big decrease in your liability for the pension. And past that, there's a little more information on OPEB. We get into, on page 45, your budgetary comparison schedule. These are the supplemental schedules in the back. The city amended the budget one time this year, and after that amendment, your total actual revenues were just a little bit above the budgeted revenues, and your total expenditures were just a little bit below, a little bit above the budgeted expenditures. But your overall is pretty darn close to where you budgeted. And past that, there are some more schedules related to the pension and the OPEB, if you have interest in looking in more details regarding that. And then we get into the internal control and compliance section. which starts on page 50. And this is where we are required to report any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies that we identify as a result of the audit. And we have two findings here. One is that we had to make material audit adjustments during the audit, which is really not unexpected at all. There are some really complicated adjustments that have to be made, especially for pension is a really big one. And then other adjustments that come into play, and this is really common for cities this size. They've made governmental accounting pretty complicated, and it's pretty difficult for a small city to be able to make all these adjustments on their own. So that was a finding, and then the other one is segregation of duties, which is really coming from the same place, and that is that in a small city, it's really difficult to have the ideal segregation of duties in place. That would be ideal, honestly, if you had a full accounting, full team, a full accounting staff. I mean, you'll have a great team here, but it's just ideally there would just be more people, and small cities aren't really able to staff it like that. So we really write this finding to kind of make you aware of the risk of just running a small city, and highlight the importance of city councils, review and oversight in their monthly meetings. And so that is the bulk of this bound report. Does anyone have any questions or want me to go over anything in more detail for that? Yes,
Having
ma'am.
worked for a bank, I understood the second finding about additional staff is, I worked in an IT department. Every auditor is going to say that no matter what. Nothing is ever divided finely enough for any auditor ever. But the first one, it says that with the audit adjustments, I mean, do we have enough people to finally review everything to get all those audit adjustments? Or is that just so very common that?
It's really common, and it's
Okay.
also continues to be made more complicated. I mean,
Okay.
like I said, these pension adjustments are difficult,
Okay.
and we make those adjustments for every city that we work
Okay,
on.
okay. I just
So,
want to make
yeah.
sure that
No,
it
it's
wasn't
not-
the case
it's
of
not
there's
unique
just
to
so
you at
many
all.
of them, we don't have enough people, or if it was just that complicated.
It's complicated,
Okay.
and it's hard to staff it with people who, I mean, I do this routinely because it's my job, but, the accounting staff here has other jobs that they have to attend to that aren't just
Several
booking
other
the pension.
jobs,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So no, it's very common.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Valerie? Okay, Valerie, thank you very much.
Okay, all right, thank you very much.
So we are expected to pass and approve this tonight. So I would entertain a motion to accept the audit as presented by Valerie Alverson, representative for Mathis Weston Hudson.
So moved.
Ms. Higgins. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Mr. Love? Gunner?
Aye.
Love?
Aye.
Bates?
Aye.
Bell?
Aye.
And Higgins.
Aye.
All right. Okay, let's go to Valerie. You're not going to offend us if you want to leave and get back on the road.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Before the storms hit?
All right, so let's go to item 8, which is the consent agenda. I have it here somewhere. I'm glad we're getting rid of all these papers. There it is. All right, so you have the resolution authorizing the city manager to write off the uncollected utility accounts, 587517, and the resolution 2021-09 authorizing the city manager to write off uncollected library dues, 3485, and the March 8th regular meeting. I would entertain a motion to accept all as presented.
So moved.
Mr. Love, do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Gunner? Bates?
Aye.
Bell?
Aye.
Higgins?
Aye.
Love?
Aye.
And Gunner.
Aye.
So the next item on your agenda was to consider planning and zoning recommendations. No, I'm reading it wrong. The next item on the agenda is to consider planning and zoning recommendations on the request of Eddie Biles to rezone approximately 1.5 acres being a part of lots 3 and all of lots 4, 5, and 6, Block 1, Baker Addition, single family with manufactured housing districts, a light industrial district for construction of multiple rental storage buildings. Mr. Calabretta is at the podium to answer any questions you have for him at this time.
Honorable Mayor and City Council, the Zoning and Planning and Zoning Committee did meet with a quorum on February 18th, 2021. We did have public comments and a public hearing with much dissent for this. We did take into consideration the fact that the long-range plan for the city has Wilbarger Street all residential. We also took into consideration the fact that good planning practice is to always buffer an industrial or commercial to a residential with a modified residential properties. So by having this as a, where it is right now with this, the multifamily or the manufactured housing district to that industrial district that's on Decatur Street, that's a good buffer right there. And the people that would be buying that wouldn't be expecting to have this wonderful view of everything behind them or around them. They would be residential. And so the recommendation of the Planning and Zoning Commission was to deny the rezoning.
Now's
I'm
your time
open
for
for
questions.
questions or whatever.
Anybody have any questions for him? You guys are a lively crowd tonight. Well, if you don't have any questions, I'm going to entertain a motion for a yay or a nay. The Planning and Zoning Committee has advised against it.
I would vote to support the Planning and Zoning Commission. I mean, I was there that night. There were a whole lot of people against it that night, and
Okay, put that in the form of a motion. The move
I
to-
hereby move to support the Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendation to deny the rezoning of Lot 7R1 and, no, that's the wrong one. I'm looking at the wrong piece.
I have a question before you do that.
What's your question?
On that right there, were letters sent out to all the neighborhood?
Yes, there were
and how
within, I believe it's 300 feet,
200.
200 feet.
How many response? I know, Donna, I'm just, how many responses did you get back, out of curiosity?
There were several letters that came back, and then we had, I don't remember the count, but at least 4.
14 letters, 2 came back to P and Z. I don't know how many the council.
I got one back on our public hearing.
Yep.
So let me ask you, say he does build the storage units over there, what is the ordinance for keeping it away from, is there's a certain 25 foot away from houses or the property line, or?
Yes, it has to be 25 feet away from the front, which would be the street
And what about houses?
there.
David, you know, is there a balance or,
My house is right in front of where he wants to build it.
I'm looking on here, I don't see any houses in front of it. Unless it's, the one with the, open the front of the blue roof. This one right here.
Exactly in front of
Okay.
where he wants to build. He's got a garden down on one end. He's
Right,
got a
I've seen that, yes ma'am, I live on the other side, so I drive by there every day, so, okay. So this is yours is your home right here,
Right here.
and what about these people right here?
Well, this house right across the street is, they've got it for sale.
Okay, and what about these folks over here?
Well, I don't know about that down the street.
Okay,
They're right here next to.
yes ma'am, okay. So it's 25 foot off the street, David?
It would be a setback building line for his construction.
Okay, and then on the property that adjoins, or it's adjacent to the other properties of the house,
Be a 10 foot,
10 foot easement, okay.
10 foot setback.
Okay, and what was the reason, why you guys, again, why y'all
Well,
doing it?
one of the reasons was it's a residential, and the long-term planning that the city has in place is for it to remain residential. And then the other was that to buffer what's already there as in industrial, with the storage units, you would put a lower type of residential housing
Yes, sir.
in there, and that's how you would buffer it. So,
I mean, that's why we have these guys to make these decisions for us. I mean, they, obviously, this is what they specialize in. I know it's frustrating for Mr. Biles to hear that.
sure.
Because I'm sure he's already purchased the property or is already have it. But, I mean, that's why we have these guys to make educated decisions for like this for us, so.
So I have a motion on the floor to
I'll
deny the
second the motion.
rezoning. You'll second? Bill?
I'm voting to deny.
You're voting
I
to
did it
deny the
sometime.
rezoning.
Yeah, I sometimes get that backwards.
Bates? Oh, you need to abstain, don't you? Higgins?
Aye.
Love?
Aye.
Gunner?
I'm gonna stay on this, please.
You're gonna abstain?
Yes.
So I've got 1 absent, 2 abstentions, and 3 for. I don't know what that gets me. That's only half the council. How does that pass?
It's a majority of the quorum that's present, though. I don't know.
So do the abstentions carry, same as a no? Okay, so then this deny of rezoning passes 3-2. Thank you, Mr. Kettlebroad, and thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Biles, for attending. Okay, the next item on the agenda is going to have to be postponed, but it will be on the agenda for April the 12th. The planning and zoning meeting didn't meet a quorum in order to have discussion on that item. So that will be back on April the 12th. So number 4 is to consider awarding the engineering services to Hayter Engineering for the Community Development 2021-2022 application cycle, and Bert has information for you on that.
This is the new community development block grant cycle for next year. Excuse me. Cycle for next year, and we have reviewed the engineering, and committee selected Hayter Engineering to do the engineering on this. They've proven to be very, very good engineers, and we every time they do something for us, it's always done right, and they stay on top of things. So I recommend we hire Hayter Engineering for our next community development block grant.
So do I have a motion to hire Hayter Engineering?
So moved.
Mr. Bill, do I have a second?
I'll second. Oops. Go ahead, Christie.
I got it, Dennis Higgins. Gunner?
Aye.
Love?
Aye.
Bates?
Aye.
Bell?
Aye.
And Higgins.
Aye.
All right, number 5 on your agenda has also been removed, and Bart's going to give you a short synopsis as to why that's been removed.
This was a resolution that we were gonna pass to, so that, the money that, in case we have to borrow it, would be non-taxable. But in this case, it would be taxable to the, ever who we borrow it from, so this resolution is needless, and so we're taking it off the agenda. Just know that we don't know if we're gonna have to borrow any money or how the city is gonna handle the fuel bill for the BTU and ERCOT, but, you know, we're just, and like I said a while ago, everything's up in the air, so. Anyway, we don't have to do this resolution.
So your next item on the agenda is Resolution 2021-11 to discuss and consider adoption of a resolution directing publication of notice of intention to issue combination tax and revenue certificates of obligation. Heard again.
This has to do with the Texas Water Development Board loan program that we're applying for. We're applying for, as I've told you before, $9,775,000. This will be, this notice or resolution that we do says that we're going to publish this on our website and in the paper that we're asking to borrow this money from the Texas Water Development Board. In the information that I passed out to you earlier, there's information on the financial review of the city, the Texas Municipal Reports, general obligation debt. I just thought that I'd read you to death today, and some other information that has to do with our financial stability. At any rate, again, I go back to the point, and there's also a payment schedule in there, and this money will be borrowed for 30 years, and you can see what the debt service on that would be. But we're still not at a point where you can't say, no, we don't want to do it. You can still say that up until before we close the loan. The meeting will be sometime in the next couple of weeks, the Water Development Board meeting that says whether they'll give us the loan or not, which we're pretty much assured that they're going to now because we're getting too much information from them. So you'll still have opportunity to say no later on. I just want to make you aware of that. So it's the $9,775,000 excuse you. So, but it's a prime interest rate, and it's 30 years to pay it off, and it's something we direly need to replace the sewer lines. For your information, just the engineering, initial engineering, is going to be 57,000 feet of sewer line will be replaced, well, with other facilities within the city, manholes. We're getting rid of some lift stations and rebuilding some, and we're going to do some work at the sewer plant, so.
It's not needed work, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And on the last page of that portion of your packet, it shows you when the public hearing will be held, it's May the 24th.
Closing will be somewhere around June the 1st, is what they're telling us, so.
Just doesn't tie your hands, but this gives us an opportunity to go forward. So I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Mr. Lowe, do I have a second?
Second.
Mr. Bell? Higgins?
Aye.
Bates?
Aye.
Gunner? Love?
Aye.
Bell?
Aye.
So our last item on the agenda is an update from our Public Works Director on the Kiwanis Park project. Real quick.
Perfect.
I'll try to make this quick.
We started this project, I guess, a little over a month ago. I'll just give you a rundown on what we completed. We cleared the park, and all that park equipment, and stored and saved what we could. We removed all the chain link fence in that area. We cleaned and dressed approximately 250 foot of drainage and added riprap where needed in that area. We built a retention pond. We built the area up around the pavilion. We installed the new chain link fence. On the Nelson side of the land, we removed 300 foot of culverts and dressed the drainage ditch in that area. We poured concrete over the culverts that we left in place over there. On the Nelson, on the opposite
riprap in that area. Poured a 113-foot of 16-inch concrete wall, poured a slab, and 113-foot of drainage flume and added riprap on the south side of the land. Poured a slab and drain and had riprap on the north side of the land. And we had a little more time left over with the contractor on the removal, so we went down to a pillar and rock and had removed that drainage pipe, the culverts down there that had collapsed. So we did that, and we put up a temporary retaining wall down there. Again, it's just temporary, just to get the water out, because it didn't do any good to do what we did on this end if we couldn't get the water out, so we just did a temporary thing there. We did get the whole park hydro mulch due to a donation from Mr. Myers. The only thing we had left in that area, and I kind of said this when we started, we might jump around, so we weren't going to stick to each little item in each phase, but we have the 50-foot retaining wall to do yet, and the wing wall, and then we'll rip wrap in that area, complete that. I kind of looked at everything today, and again, like I said earlier, we have drainage issues all the way from 59 all the way down. The water seems to be flowing pretty good through there. I mean, you're still going to get areas where it's going to back up due to the size of the drainage area, because it reduces way down the further you get back towards 59, Lamb Street, Elbow, in those areas. It's real small, so it does back up. Good news is that I originally came in and asked for $108,900. We're way under budget. I think we're going to be, when we complete, we're going to actually be around $83,000. And that's a lot of that was we were able to do a lot of work in-house, and the contractor's moving pretty quick on the project. So, any questions?
What's the status of getting any of the park equipment back, and is there a potential of using some of that money to maybe get new park equipment for?
That won't be my decision.
Okay.
Okay, so, no, we did the hydro mulching, and we'll see how that goes, but in order for that, any of the residual money to be left, that would have to be approved by the budget. I have discussed with a couple of different entities that's willing to make donations towards buying new equipment. Not a lot of the equipment was salvaged because of age, and when they went to move it, it would break or.
I figured a lot of it was,
But I guess I should turn that on. My goal is to have special needs equipment over in that area. So that would be our one and only park that had any special needs equipment. And the Parks Board and the Rotarians are so far on board for wanting to commit to helping fund some of that equipment. So as far as the park, putting the park back together, it's kind of out of his hands.
Okay.
But I will say it is the reason that we did build pads up around the digging area in case, equipment is put back.
Yeah. And he didn't say too much, but the hydro mulching that was done over there was all a donation from Bowie Industries. Not only the hydro mulching, but the equipment and the hydro mulching itself. He wanted to try out new equipment, so we were his guinea pig, and we got a lot more hydro mulching than I thought we would get. So they spent 2 days over there spraying the park, so that, I'm very thankful to that. That could have been very expensive. So,
Not $10,000.
yeah. So it's a very kind gesture for them to come out and do that. And Dean was up on the truck doing it. Wow.
So I remember you saying a lot of the problem with the park was downstream. There's problems farther down the stream.
Well, you still have the problem under Nelson.
Right.
Crosses, which, again, I will say on that, I don't know how long that's gonna hold up, because
Okay.
the culverts under there are just as bad as what we took out. And then Pillar and Rock, like I said, what we did down there is just temporary.
Okay, so that was my next question. When, are we gonna wait and see what this does, before we start phase 2? In order to finish all that, or are we just gonna kind of, do y'all have kind of a battle plan on that, or?
Well, I have a battle plan, that's totally up to you guys.
Well, that's what I mean,
I can give you an
what would be
example.
next?
I reevaluated Nelson there. I mean, originally said, based off the engineer's design from 2017, they recommended putting concrete culverts and everything back in there. You're looking at a cost of $400,000 to $600,000. It can be done with corrugated piping into there.
long is that gonna last?
It should last 50 years.
But versus concrete, which would last twice as long at least.
So, but you're gonna get to a point, and I'm just putting it out there, this coming, you're gonna get to a point where that decision is gonna have to be made. You could probably, based on my numbers right now, do it with the corrugated and build your head walls and everything for probably about $125,000.
Okay.
But you still have the issue in Wayne with this is, you still have a lot of water that goes through a lot of volume. And you're not, unless you actually go in there and put bigger drainage in, which you'd have to probably raise the road to do that, to get more out of there. You're just really.
You're talking about,
Out of the
Nelson, or, oh, yeah, okay.
So, and then you still have the issue at middle there where it comes across, that drainage is going. That whole area, like I said, from 59 all the way out, got to be addressed at some point.
Yeah, but when it comes off 59, it comes down Nelson, doesn't it? Isn't that where it's pretty much coming down?
Yeah, it comes back and goes around like Elba and Lamb.
But it's draining on the road
Back in
as well.
middle,
Right.
yeah.
But there's drains underneath, not right at Nelson and Mill, but if you've ever stood on Margaret's property at that corner of Nelson and Mill and looked, you're petrified the next school bus that goes out over that street is gonna wind up nose in. I mean, it is scary looking down in that culvert.
So I would say probably come back with the next big obstacles, like you were saying, the culverts under Nelson and the other.
Pillar and rock.
Yeah, right. And get those done instead of just, keep pushing it
The
off.
one on Pillar and Rock, and I kind of showed Bert to get in this, is that really is gonna cost a little more because it needs to be moved. If you go out and look at it, actually, most of the water, there's 3 drainage culverts in there. Most of the water that comes down there straight into Cosmetic 45. So all the water's trying to go into that one culvert. You need to take that and straighten that across, so the water shoots straight out. So that's what happened in 2015, all that water coming through there, and it couldn't get out, so it blew the road out.
Right. I mean, I know we've got the other projects going on, like sewer and water lines all over
Right.
town and stuff, but I'd like to see us continue on with this and fix what's further down and also upstream as well.
But I will tell you on that too, if that decision is gonna be made, if you did Nelson or Tiller, whichever one, I recommend you went ahead and did Nelson, but that really needs to be started like in June, July, or August, when
Right.
it's dry. Because if you open that up, then you're gonna run into a big issue, right now.
And when school's not going on.
Yeah, definitely.
Started in June, so it's
So I
done by
guess
August.
come up with a proposal, of what you think you would reapproach this then.
Okay.
That'd be okay? I appreciate what you're doing, you're doing great, guys. You
With the
guys.
with the right rain, you may not have to dig too much of Nelson out,
Right.
because he won't be
That's
there.
what I'm kind of afraid of.
Just let the water do the work?
If you actually saw what we pulled out, you'd be a little nervous.
Yeah.
Just like that. And the culverts underneath Nelson are collapsed, egg shaped, they should be, well, they're not.
I know the most important thing right now is to get our drainage, like we need it to be done. But I'm hoping when the smoke clears, one of the things that we've discussed this evening is about the beautification of our city.
Right.
That being one of the most traveled roads in town over there. I hope when all this is done, we've kind of talked maybe one time when it's all said, if we need to do some landscape or do something to make that look a little prettier over there, because right now, I mean, you're not.
Everybody comes to town to look at the schools and it's,
Well, they thought they were coming to Arizona or coming to see the Grand Canyon, I mean, that's a pretty good little trail going through there. But I'm just saying, if we get an opportunity at some point in time, wait till all the grass grows in and see what everything looks like. I know over a period of time, sometimes we get used to seeing things, but hey, I'm all about, that if we can, the more beautification that we can do, the better off we are. So I'm just throwing that out there for friendly thoughts, okay? Because you're doing a great job.
You wanna fix it and then make it pretty.
I do. I want to fix it. I'm more worried about right now the water going through there, but then when we get done, I want to look like new on TV. That's what I want.
And I'm really appreciative that our city clubs, like our Rotarians are stepping up and buying. I was really
And our
happy,
businesses.
proud of that, doing that. Yeah, their businesses pitched in it.
Well, I can tell you right now, we're going to have to. I went over there and watched the equipment we have over there. We're going to have some new equipment. There's nothing about that over there that's going to work. I mean, it's rough. Hey, not that they didn't do a good job, but guys, if you went over there and saw what they dug out of the ground over there, really, I'm surprised the archaeologists didn't come in and check all that stuff out, because there was some stones that came out of there with some wording on it and all sorts of things.
We
and
saved that, we figured out where it came from.
It was like an old train
It was
station.
in, it was
wasn't
in, it was right here. It was in the middle of Tarrant and Mason. It used to be the stoplight.
Right, but,
So-
I mean, it was neat looking, I mean, but, you know, just, we're probably gonna have to figure out some way to get Clyde to let go of some of his money and try to get that pretty on it. After you get the baseball part taken care of.
More motors, Clyde.
But I will get you some numbers.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tony, I appreciate
Thank you
it.
very much.
Thanks, Don.
Okay, so I bypassed public comments, so if we have any public comments, I can take them now. If not, it's 7 o'clock and I'd like to adjourn. So 6:59, we're going to adjourn. Thank you. I know.